And here we are. It is a Monday. I'm surprised and actually amazed we managed to get James Hanley on a Monday morning. Clearly nothing else to do.
Monday's my quiet day.
Mate, James Hanley, product manager at Zendesk. Mate, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Simon. I feel honored to be invited onto the podcast to chat to you about this. We know each other obviously from our overlap at Zendesk. So it's been a while. It'll be nice to catch up and chat about some of the stuff that's been going on around hiring and building teams at Zendesk.
Perfect. And I think spoiler alert for anyone watching or listening, I was a recruiter at Zendesk and actually was part of the team that hired James, and we had a sort of couple of sort of back and fro conversations and eventually managed to find the right team, because I think from memory back then I was hiring across quite a few product teams. I think it was about trying to find the right team, the right time. But what is it? 7 years now you've been at Zendesk?
A good memory. It's 7.5.
Wow.
I started January 2018, and when I think of 2018, for whatever reason, I always lose the year of 2018, but it was right at the start of 2018. And so these days I've kind of become part of the furniture, I think, at Zendesk Melbourne at least. And it's been a great, honestly, the time has flown. I've seen the company change a lot, and that's been really, really interesting. And I still continue to get up every day and love going to Zendesk.
Brilliant.
As cliche as that might sound.
I love it. I love it when people, and to me, that's one of the best things about what I do, about recruiting, is when people love what they do, they've found the right team, they've found their tribe. And the flip side of that being that the business is growing and changing and delivering new challenges and new things to solve as well. And that keeps people engaged and gives them new things to get excited about. So to me, it's always a win-win. That was a pretty solid year of hiring. There's a few people who I hired at Zendesk who are still there, and some I think that might have moved on, but there's a few that are there still, and a couple of people I know who I didn't hire but have since joined. Nick Kernahan, I don't know if you know Nick. So Nick's good friend of mine as well. Good guy. We'll keep him for now. But they're a good bunch. But mate, you've built product teams across sort of early stage and global scale businesses, and I guess I'm excited to sort of dive into what sort of great hiring and leadership looks like when you're inside sort of ambitious, growing businesses that are trying to achieve things. And I think that's one of my overarching memories from my time at Zendesk, when Mikkel, our then CEO, was doing the tour, and we had this big target of trying to hit $1 billion in revenue a year. And I think at that point we're at like 700,000 a year, and I remember him saying, once we get to a point where we're doing that sort of revenue, we really own and control our future. We can make really good decisions about acquisitions and people and locations and all that sort of thing. But there's been a lot of change since that time, and I guess that's a whole bunch of stuff that we'll talk about. What's the difference in your experience sort of around hiring and leading teams sort of in early stage compared to more established businesses where processes and that sort of thing are more established?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. So some of my background, for those who are watching, obviously I joined Zendesk when the company was about, I think, 1,500 globally, if I recall correctly. And so now it's around 6,000, 6,500 globally. So it's increased in dramatic size. And prior to that, I worked at some smaller businesses, relatively speaking, certainly not like startups are 3 or 4 people, but teams that are far smaller in larger organizations trying to establish new product. So it's been a really interesting experience to kind of seeing a little bit of both ends of the spectrum. And I think what I've kind of seen over time is that certainly at the smaller end, you are looking for people who are able to really roll their sleeves up and do a whole bunch of different requirements. Whether it's support as part of being a product person, and leaning into maybe customer success and getting customers successful early on in that journey, versus when you are at a larger company, you do tend to look for specialists. and people who have got depth of experience rather than necessarily breadth or generalists. I also think that, if I'm honest, some of my thinking in this space has kind of like gone hand in hand with my own personal development and career growth. When I started out early on hiring and building teams, I reflecting probably have like a lower confidence in my own ability to lead people. And I think that affected some of my own decisions. I did let like fears about who I felt like I could manage and lead influence some of the decision making that I made. And I made some mistakes, I think, probably because of that. And so as I've become a little bit more senior and I've hired a little bit more people and my career has developed and grown, I've realized that one of the real things is that I need to know the number one skill I'm hiring for, whether it's small business or there's large business. What's the number one skill that I'm hiring for? And I need to hire someone who's knows much more about that than I do. Like, I might know a little bit about a topic, but I need to find an expert in that topic, and everything else I can help you with and I can train you up with. But if I get you an expert in this thing and you're not so good in that, that's great. That gives me the opportunity to help develop and bring you along. So I ask the question these days, what's the easiest thing for me to train and learn onto a new hire? And what's the thing that I can't teach? And that tends to be like the gap. And I think that applies globally, like whether it's a startup or whether it's a large company. My job then becomes about becoming the glue, not about being the expert in the room. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. And it's interesting as we do more hiring, I think that the process of hiring is like learning any other skill. But I think it's one that we don't, the figurative we don't spend enough time focusing on. I think, because there are emotions at play, there's sometimes some uncomfortable things. When you're a hiring manager as well, you need to make calls on rejecting people. And sometimes that can feel bad when there's someone you really like, but they're not right for you right now and you have to reject them. So there's a whole bunch of things that are quite challenging about it, but I do think it's a skill and an art that we can learn. And I think that what you just described is a good example of that. I think the other really interesting comment from what you just mentioned as well is sometimes we have this tendency to think about what we perceive as our own limitations in leadership ability. So interviewing people who are quite strong personalities, we sometimes think, oh my God, are they going to be really hard to manage? Like, are they going to be challenging for me as a leader? And I think they're all totally reasonable things for us to understand and to be wary of. But I think as soon as we start doing that, we start distancing ourselves from the very first thing you point out. What's the reason we're hiring this role? And we're not always hiring someone for us to totally coach and teach. We're hiring them because we need someone with great skills in a domain or in a specific area who know more than us, and that's fine. As you said, we're developing in the things that they don't know yet. The learning about the company, the onboarding stuff, we can teach them. But if they're brilliant and have had great relevant experience in this thing that we're struggling to solve, that's the whole point, isn't it?
And that, I think, is one of the really hardest parts early on, particularly early on hiring. But maybe like if you take like early stage companies as well, you're hiring for so much. And you're hiring for such a range of things. And when you're new to hiring, or you're new to developing teams, you're not 100% sure what you probably need to hire for. So that's one of the real challenges of like, and over time, you get better at understanding that. Like, what is the one thing that I can't live without in this particular role or this particular job or this particular person who's coming in? And everything else is negotiable. Because you never find the Goldilocks candidate. You never do. Yeah.
Yeah. I wrote something a couple of weeks ago. I'll link it in the comments here, but this notion of perfect hiring, it doesn't exist. We're all humans. We're dealing with humans. We now have, the added complexity, if you like, of remote teams and, disparate teams working in different time zones. So the perfect thing and the perfect hire doesn't exist. But what we can do is mitigate our risk around poor decision making, and that kind of lands with us as leaders, that we have to mitigate that kind of risk. Talking more about, I guess, product managers specifically, what are the things that the traits or signals that you sort of look for in PMs behind the resume, and perhaps not just the technical things, but the more sort of human aspects that you look for?
Yeah. So there's this concept that I was introduced to a few years ago about, I think I stumbled across it on a company called Reforge. And it's this idea of PM specialization. We think of like developers as having like a front end specialization or a particular code language specialization. But we don't think about that with product managers. We think of like all product managers are created equal. And so there's this idea of like, there are different specializations in product management. The four that kind of Reforge put forward was there's core feature development PMs, there's growth PMs, and there's platform PMs that are kind of like building scale and like platforms for other developers. And then there's innovation PMs. And so I think that it's really interesting to think a little bit about, again, hitting on this idea of what is the number one thing you're looking for, and what type of PM kind of fills that gap. Are you looking for a growth PM, or are you looking for an innovation PM? Are you building like something from scratch? Are you doing a 0 to 1 product? Are you a 0 to 1 company and you're looking for someone in that, or are you more established? And so like matching that is a thing that I look for when I'm thinking about like lining up talent beyond a resume. But like, there's another thing that I look for a lot, and this is kind of like gut feel, but I'm looking for people who are going to reduce stress for me. So I read a quote from Mark Cuban, I think like only a couple of weeks ago, but it really resonated with me around this. The best employees, the employees that have stayed with him the longest, are the ones that have reduced stress, not created it. And so Zendesk is a really complicated business. It's globally distributed. It's got huge scale. It's got thousands of employees. It's a highly technical environment. And so operating in that environment is kind of hard. And I am looking for someone that's going to reduce the amount of stress that I'm worried about. And so my barometer for this looks a lot like, how would I feel if this person started on Monday? Would I be excited and really confident about that person starting? Or would I be unsure? And would I be like thinking about all the things I need to develop with them? And I think that is my judge of like, do I have a feeling that this person is going to reduce my stress, or is this person going to increase the level of stress on me? So those are kind of like the two things that I'm looking for, trying to match your experience to like the need of the role. And then I'm also looking for like this confidence and belief that I get of like, are you going to reduce my stress, or are you going to like create? I think it's going to be harder for me.
And so then what sort of signals that would tell you that someone will reduce or increase stress?
I'm definitely looking for like the confidence that I think that you get the role and you fit into like the needs of the role, and you've got applicable experience to slot into that. And if that combination of things really work, I have high confidence that you're going to be successful. There's then business specific things, particularly again, talking about the size of the company. With the amount of people that we work with at Zendesk and the scale that we're dealing with, a person who's worked at like, a startup of 5 is probably going to have some culture shock, like entering Zendesk. And so I am looking for soft skills and your ability to kind of like fit in. So it's like you're bringing those things, and I know that you're going to do really great working with a range of stakeholders, working with teams that are globally distributed. If you've got to take a late night call or an early morning call, and you're going to be able to sit on that Zoom call and be there and present. Like that's a level of confidence I get. So it's really about kind of like soft skills in many ways. What sort of soft skills are you bringing? And it's honestly, Simon, I feel like it's not, for me, it's not a science, or I haven't cracked the science yet. It's kind of a little bit of a feel, and you do make mistakes. If someone's got a better like heuristic that I could borrow for that, or model,
Yeah.
I would totally borrow it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I sort of had this thing of, I totally get the soft skills are sort of, I think in my mind, I reframe them as human skills. The ability to listen in an interview, listen to the question in the interview, think through a response, be able to tie, very comfortable having business dialogue around specific problems or even technical dialogue around specific problems and being able to talk through, we arrived at this juncture where we could have gone left, we could have gone right. We weighed up the pros and cons, and they could talk about those pros and cons really naturally. I think these very human skills, for me, when I'm interviewing someone and they're talking like that, I can picture them working with product teams, working with engineers, working with customers. Because if this is how you just communicate and talk through issues in an interview, which is the most artificial sort of communication environment we have, because everyone's trying to impress. But if you're relatively natural in an interview and can think through those things, that gives me pretty good confidence that in a day-to-day discussion with a customer or a prod team, dev team, whatever, that you're going to be able to work together to get the outcome that you're looking for. And I think just good team players, so just evidence of working in teams that are solving difficult things. There are teams that for some reason things just seem to always just go right, and that's great. But I'm always really interested in hearing about things that have been really challenging for people. And how did you deal with that? When you think you've nailed PMF and you launch something and nobody's clicking and no one's using it, like what do you do then? That's really challenging. So how do people work through that? So again, I think this sort of really human skills of being able to tell stories around that sort of thing is a good way to go as well. You've sort of alluded to this sort of personal evolution of learning a bit about yourself around leadership and hiring. What are the biggest things that you've noticed about the sort of maybe the differences in how you interview or how you lead people now?
Well, certainly, I think that like from an interviewing perspective, I take a way more casual approach than I used to. I used to feel like, and you mentioned like an interview is an artificial experience. It totally is. And I think that like I always have really good interviews with people when I'm like the interviewer. And I find that is because I try to create like a conversational experience and I try to create like a friendly environment. I don't love like the traditional, like I'm going to ask you a question and then I'm going to ask you the next question. I'm going to ask you the next question. And like, it's artificial. And I don't think that like the candidate is going to be nervous. They're not going to do a good job. They're going to leave that interview and they're going to go, I should have said this, I should have said that. And so like, I have a few techniques that we can kind of get into for like how I manage for that. But certainly from a hiring perspective, I'm a lot more casual than I used to be. And I am a casual person in general. Like I know that about myself. Yeah. So I be my authentic self in an interview environment. And I try to make sure that like, again, this comes back to confidence too. I have the confidence to be myself these days and to not try and be something I'm not, to think that I'm got to be a certain polished button up version of like what like society thinks of like an interviewer. I've definitely talked about kind of like mistakes and stuff. I've definitely made some mistakes, both on the hiring side, but also on the leading team side. And this is kind of off topic, but one of the biggest mistakes I feel like I've learned and I've like made in the past is early on when I first started to like grow, I had like accountability for 4 separate teams and 4 separate PMs, and we were working on this larger project. I made this decision of like creating this amazing strategy and putting each of the teams on one part of the strategy to kind of like build it all together and like get to like this end goal. And in retrospect, what I also did was just dilute focus and made like the workforce for each of the problems that they're working on far less. And so one of the things that I do now in terms of like leadership of teams and leadership of PMs is I want to identify what's the most important thing out of everything that we're going to do, what's the number one thing that we have to do first, and put everybody on that, or as many people as practical to put on that problem to deliver that as fast as possible. And that was a really big learning. And I've had great results since with that kind of approach of like not focusing too much on splitting up responsibilities and having, teams focus on individual things. Instead, what's the most important thing? And let's take our collective workforce, which is large, and let's put it on the most important thing and deliver that as quickly as possible and iterate and build and then move on to the next thing. That was one of my biggest learnings on the leadership side, because I felt that I was doing the right thing at the time. Now I realize the right thing is focus, and the right thing is certainly on the product delivery side is throughput, because that helps you also iterate and get feedback and validate and evolve. If you're stuck in a delivery mode and you're not getting it out, then you're not going to build good product. So that's one of the biggest things I've learned on the leadership side. Slightly off topic from hiring, but definitely like team leadership.
No, I mean, I think that I think when you're able to have that kind of dialogue as well, with potential candidates and potential people going to join your team, and you can talk about how work happens, not just what work happens. How we make decisions on what's getting built, how we make decisions on what to focus on next, how we allocate tasks, how we decide we're going to trade this off for that because of X, Y, Z. How decisions are made and how work gets distributed and executed is as important as what we do and the tools we use and all that sort of thing. And I think it's that helps you then get alignment with potential hires as well. If they've worked in environments previously that your approach really works for them, that's great. If they've never experienced that before, and they actually like working a completely different way, that's actually a great place to get to, because maybe maybe we're not the right fit for each other, and that's worth investigating a bit more. You might describe those ways of working, and someone that you're interviewing has never worked that way before, but suddenly that makes sense. And God, why haven't we done that previously? I'd love to work like that. That sounds great. So again, I keep having this dialogue with hiring managers and with teams that hiring is about details. Like good hiring is about getting lots of little details right, and validating skills and experience is one thing, but validating that the way you work and how you work together in the future, that you're compatible for each other, is also something that we should be thinking about as well. And I don't think enough teams do that. I think in the relatively short time we have in interviews together, we're often looking for validation of skills, experience, values, alignment, and that sort of thing. But rarely, I don't think we do enough time talking about the things I just mentioned. And someone starts on day one and they go, "Oh, you deliver things that way? Oh, I've never done that before. This is suddenly I feel really uncomfortable, and now this is another big learning curve." And teams go, "How come we didn't talk about this beforehand? Now, we thought this person was going to get up to speed. Time to competency, I think, is an important thing. We thought this person was going to get up to speed in 3 months. Hey, it could be 6 months. They've got a whole bunch of things to learn." So, I think these are things that often get sort of overlooked. You sort of mentioned mistakes, and we don't need to dig into specific mistakes around hiring, but when you reflect on mistakes, hires that 3 months in, it's not working for them, it's clearly not working for the team as well. When you sort of look back on maybe that interviewing process, what do you learn?
This is really interesting. So like personal view is that I think one of the biggest mistakes companies make, and certainly individuals will make, is not having a candidate meet with enough people. You're talking about like 3 months in, you're discovering that this isn't the right person. And then that's a way harder situation to deal with. And so I think that like not having a candidate meet with enough people and not meeting with enough candidates are like the two primary mistakes I think people make in hiring. And I think that can take a couple of different variations. So like you might have not enough stages in your interview process. You might be like a hiring manager screen and like a one set of like a team, cross-functional team meet them, and then like a manager meets them, and that's it.
Yeah.
It may not be enough stages to really get to the core of is this the right person? Version 2 of that, I think, is actually like saying no too early. So you get like a candidate apply, you do a hiring manager screen, or you do like a recruiter screen, and you just like, no, this person's not right. And sometimes that's very, very obvious for sure. And you don't want to like waste their time and your own time. But if you're saying no too early, you might miss out on like a hidden gem. So like, again, I'm casual, I'm informal, I'm having conversations. My goal is to like find the goodness in a conversation with you. Is like, what is you've got a job, you're doing well, you're interesting to me. I want to know the goodness that you bring. That's not going to happen if I say, oh no, you didn't answer this question right, so you're out. And then I think like the last version of that is like just hiring really fast. Like I try to meet with as many candidates as practical, and I try to put as many of those candidates through a panel of interviewers as possible. And I'm conscious of people's time, the candidates and the people that are in my interviewing panel. But I think that you've got to get enough people to meet a person, and you've got to get enough people through that funnel before you really know, and you build that confidence. I talked before about gut instinct of like, this person's going to reduce my level of stress. I think that confidence comes from these two things working in tandem, is like meeting with enough people and getting them to meet enough people. And that works really effectively. In my experience, the cream rises to the top by the end of the process is how I feel.
There's a couple of things you said there. You said, I try and meet as many candidates as practical. And I just want to flag that for people watching, listening. You didn't say I meet as many candidates as possible, but as many as practical. So, and I think it's really important to just call out the distinction there, because we all have, hiring is another thing that we have to do on top of our day jobs, unless you're a recruiter. And you know, when you're leading teams, you have a whole bunch of other drains on your time and things that you have to do. But owning the hiring process is still your job, because it's your role and it's your team. So I get that. So I think we established that. But meeting as many people as practical, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's an important thing to do. I also love this thing of going into hiring discussions, trying to find the best in people. And again, there's this thing that the collective we do, that I think we look at this the wrong way around. The amount of interviews or discussions I've been in with hiring managers, and they're always looking for reasons not to hire someone. And they always default to the things they didn't like. Oh, they didn't do this. They didn't answer that. They don't have this. They didn't go to that uni. They don't have this experience. Rather than, well, actually, they've got experience in other object-oriented languages, not just the one that we use. So the concepts, they totally understand. There's a small learning curve there for them. Hey, that's fine. They haven't done this. Well, they've actually done that. And that's probably more relevant to what we're looking for. And if you're prepared to scratch below the surface a bit with this mindset of looking for reasons why you might want to hire this person, I think you'll actually unearth a lot more. And I think the way that you go into those conversations with a bit of generosity of spirit and all that sort of thing, I think is really important. I think also one of the things that I don't see enough from people is, and I say people, I'm talking about hiring managers, is explaining what they're looking for in the process. So if it was you and I first call, I'd be saying something like, James, it's great to meet you. Let me just cover off some of the really boring stuff first. Our interview process is likely to be about 4 or 5 discussions. The reason we do that is we want you to get a really good sense of the people that you'll be working with, the scale of the problems that we'll be asking you to potentially solve, and make sure that we're the right business for you, and vice versa. Does that make sense? The person gets yes to do it, whatever. And you might then go into something like, what I'm looking for in this conversation is to understand more about how your experience aligns with what we're trying to do, talk to you about how we work, understand how our ways of working work for you. And what you're ultimately doing is you're setting the scene for what to expect from the conversation. It drops the anxiety of the other person, rather being this quick fire robotic question after question. Tell me about a time when, tell me about your experience with, tell someone what you're looking for and what the purpose of the discussion is. And that helps then set them the right way. I think interviewing is part process, part art, part science, if that makes any sense at all. And when I say science, probably like a bit of psychology. Like if you can get people just relaxed and being their best selves in a discussion, you've got a better chance of finding the things that you're looking for.
Yeah,
Does that make
100%. I couldn't agree more. I really think that things like behavioral based questions, and I know that there's techniques for managing like behavioral based questions, like STAR, situation, task, action, result. That helps you break down a behavioral based question. But I also think that behavioral based questions put a candidate on a spot to pull from their, X years of experience to try and find the perfect example to like answer a question. I do tend to not ask a lot of behavioral based questions. And I think that you said a really interesting point here early on about like I set the scene. And so if I pull back to that idea of like the core competencies of product management, I try to be like, look, we're looking for a growth PM. We're looking for someone who's going to come into this and develop this up. And part of your role is also going to be this over here. And that might be really hard, but that's not our primary focus. We want to look at this and that can come in time. I have a couple of roles live for the moment. And one of the roles I had something like 130 people apply within a few days. There's definitely lots of interest in the market. And, going back to like meeting with as many candidates as possible, we try to like not just like get rid of everybody. It's like, let's get like a lot of those into the early stages and meet with as many of those people that as practical. Yeah. And in those conversations, kind of like set this up, make it a conversation, understand what you can bring and where your experience is and how that matches to what we're looking for. And also give that person an opportunity to answer those questions direct and with the knowledge that this is what you're looking for, rather than there being like these mysterious set of behavioral based questions that you're looking for, like the unicorn that's going to answer everything perfectly. I just don't think it's an effective interviewing approach. I think it's a really great interviewing approach to say no to people. I don't necessarily think it's a great interviewing approach to time to competency, which I think is ultimately the key metric that we should be thinking about with our hiring, is how long does it take for this person to be excelling at your company?
I couldn't agree more. I think that there's another couple of things that I think work really well as well. Someone applies for a role, you see their application and you review their resume, and in whatever system you use, you move them into the bucket of, yes, people I want to talk to. Hopefully they're getting some kind of automated email saying, yes, we want to talk to you. That should be sending a copy of a PD, maybe a bit of a slide deck around, hey, we're Zendesk and this is our team and this is what we're doing. And so they go into the first conversation with the hiring manager with some detail about the role and the company and that sort of thing. One of the questions that I like to ask, and again, this isn't about catching people out. It's about understanding their level of understanding about the role. So one of the questions I like to ask is, before we start, why don't you describe the role that we're hiring for as you understand it right now? And if we're wildly apart in our understanding, I'll fill in the gaps for you. They can then I think it gives them a chance to, okay, cool. So what I think the role is, when I reviewed the PD, spoiler alert, if someone says I haven't even looked at the PD yet, then that might be a little indicator of you're underprepared. It could be a time management thing. It could be you're just another interview. Like, all these things are possible. So, but if someone can describe the role as they understand it based on the PD and the details you send them, you can help fill in the gaps. And that might be exactly where you're saying something like, that's absolutely right. Essentially what we need is, we need a growth PM. We need someone who can do X, Y, Z to help us get here. The reason for that is because of this. And again, I think something that we don't do enough of is give the business context of why we're hiring the role. The reason we're hiring this role is to allow us to do this, and this, because that ties into our strategy for the next 2 years of delivering X to this many customers or whatever it is. And if you can start putting the jigsaw pieces together for people and they understand why the role exists, what their part of the bigger picture is, and why the things that you're looking for in terms of experience and skills are important, then they go, gotcha, right, now this all makes sense. So
Yes.
again, I think this is the part art, part skill thing, is setting up the conversations properly from the start. And I think the rewind of all of this is when you're the hiring manager and you're putting together your PD for the role before you even start talking to people, getting very, very clear with your, either your direct leader or the rest of the team who are going to be helping you interview. What are the most important things we're looking for in this role, and what's this person delivering? This collaborative decision making and agreement on, this is what we're hiring for. This is how we know we're going to see it when we see it. And then this is how we describe the role and get into it. All these things are linked and intertwined. And I think they're the things that if you're hiring and you haven't had anyone to show you how to do those things or connect the dots for you as a hiring manager, then you always find hiring really, really difficult. But I think once you make this connection, you get this sort of almost sort of like the light behind you glows.
Yes.
And suddenly it makes sense.
Yeah, it all just really fits into place, doesn't it? Yeah. It's very true.
Do you run hiring retros? Do you review hiring that you've done in the past and, hey, what's working well, what's not working so well?
Have done. Haven't done one for a while. But as I said, I got a couple of roles open at the moment. And so I think that it's a really good opportunity to kind of like reintroduce a process like that. But it's definitely a thing that I've been a member of, both as a hiring manager, but also as a candidate. So I remember doing that specifically when I first joined Zendesk and giving a lot of feedback. And my own personal experience of being a candidate at Zendesk was very much aligned with some of the things I've said here, which is like there was stages, there was great communication. I understood what the role was, and a lot of positive. Like I had nothing but positive feedback of what that experience was like as a candidate, despite there being so many stages, which there was. I really felt by the end of it, the stages allowed me to show who I was and what I would bring. And obviously you get that email of like, there's another one, and that's like, oh God, another one. But I do really feel that that helps succeed is like meeting with enough people. So have done retros. I don't think many companies, and I don't think many hiring managers probably do that with their candidates. And I think like you got to pick the right time, right? Like 3 months in, 6 months in is kind of like the right time frame, I think, to run one of those. You can't do it too early, and you can't do it too late. It's got to be in that 3 to 6 month window, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And I just think you can learn so much from hiring retros, and you're getting your hiring team together. Who out of your hiring team really actually hates interviewing? Who feels that they need to learn more? Who in your hiring team would like to sit in on the interviews that you do so they can learn from you? Rather than us just going, right, now you're interviewing this person, you're interviewing that person. I think getting hiring, if you can get more competency and comfort in your hiring teams as a whole, that's only a good thing. And again, if you can learn from your candidates, the people you've hired 3-6 months in, and get them reflecting on what was great, is what was promised in interview the reality that they're experiencing in their in day-to-day life now? Like, are we describing this properly? Are we framing the problems that you'll be solving? Are we framing the opportunities that you're going to get to grow the right way, or are they worse? Are they better? Like sometimes we get so caught up in our own mantras of things that just having some alternative opinion and hopefully suggestions is great.
Exactly.
What's for candidates? I'm sort of thinking about job seekers who are going to be interviewing and that sort of thing. What's one question that do you think people should ask during an interview to really understand what they're walking into? Doesn't have to be one.
I'll tell you the very best question the most memorable question I've ever been asked as an interviewer, and it's stuck with me. I think it's a really clever question. It was, how do you feel on Sunday night? And I thought that was such a brilliant, insightful question. Because it really cuts to the core of like, how happy are you at your job and like, how much do
Mm,
you like working here? It answers so many things in one
mm,
go. But I think
yeah.
that like, and like segueing into this, so it's very easy to respond to that question. So it's great. I love it, whatever. I think the number one mistake we make as both candidates and as interviewers, and I give this advice to interviewers, is that we go through a set of questions and we just move on to the next thing.
Mm,
And I think that the best piece of advice I can give is to ask follow-ups and not just
yep.
one or two. I think like,
Mm,
firstly, you talked about active listening before. If you're
mm,
truly active listening, there's going to be something someone said that you can follow up on.
mm,
And so for interviewers, this is a really great way to like break through candidate BS. Like,
yeah.
because by the second or the third follow-up, their level of knowledge, if it's shallow, is going to kind of be exposed.
Yeah.
I think for candidates, your interviewer is going to get like the same question from every candidate. Like, what's
Mm,
it like? What's the culture like? Oh, same
mm,
sort of set of questions. But how many of those candidates are really like asking follow-ups and digging deeper
mm, mm,
and
mm,
and uh, creating like a memorable, like this person's curious and they're
yep.
listening and they're responding. So like, for instance,
Yep.
you might ask a very basic question tell me about like PMs that do well in your company. And they're like, oh, well, we want people that are going to be like really good at like negotiating with stakeholders. And it's like, okay, tell me why negotiating with stakeholders is such an important skill for like PMs in your company. Oh, because our
Yep.
company operates like this. And oh, so it sounds like there's some really key people in your organization that you work with on a regular basis. Yeah, and it kind of like follows on, and becomes a
Yep.
conversation. So it de-escalates the situation,
Mm,
and
mm,
it shows active listening, and you get to like a real nugget, whether you're asking the questions or you're like the interviewer or the candidate. You get to a
mm,
real nugget
mm,
of truth there. If I came straight out and I said, "Tell me how much time you get with your VPs," you're going to be like, "That's not a great question." But if you
yep.
lead to that point through a
Mm,
conversation by asking follow-ups, it's way more successful. So my one thing, it's not like one question, because I don't think there is one question,
no.
but I think it's ask follow-ups,
Yep.
because that is way more insightful for you as a candidate, and it's
Yep.
way better as an interviewer to ask follow-ups.
Mm, yep. And I think that's brilliant for people in all roles, for PMs specifically when they're going to be doing things like interviewing users about why a feature is important or not important, why they do X, Y, Z, and they say, "Oh, well, I clicked on it because it was this color," but why?
Yeah.
That's the core of a whole bunch of what PMs do, right? So
Yeah.
if you're not someone who's like that, then
Yeah.
then yeah, maybe there's a disservice you're doing yourself. Um, it's a slight segue, but I was reviewing some resumes for people recently, and some PMs with great experience, and for both of them, and it was I think it was purely coincidence that they happened sort of within a couple of days of each other, but they'd they got I knew they had great experience, but their resumes, one of the PMs, not once did they talk about the user. Like,
Yeah.
how the things they worked on had impacted the user, or
Yeah.
why a user, right? And we had a bit of a chat about that, and they were like, "Oh, I can't believe that I've missed all this out. No wonder I'm applying to roles and I'm not getting any response. So I have to make a few tweaks to some stuff, and now things are really starting to move as well. So I think sometimes it's easy to, I guess what I'm getting at is sometimes it's easy to go back to your default settings of something, but sometimes having another opinion or viewpoint, or opinion, fresh set of eyes, if you like,
Yeah.
can just make you rethink where you're at. So, and I think that applies again across the whole of hiring,
Yeah.
and interviewing a strange thing. Sort of, we ask people to be as natural as possible in an unnatural setting. Yeah, it's so strange, but it's on us as interviewers to own that and set the scene.
Exactly.
In the same way that a big part of leadership for me is about creating the environment of success for your people and your teams. As hirers and interviewers, it's on us to create the conditions of success in an interview that allow the candidate to perform the best, that allow us to find as much information as we can.
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Again, it's the same kind of like themes like cropping back up, isn't it? It's like this idea of like creating an environment and getting to like the goodness of a person, the core goodness, and knowing what you're looking for and mapping that against what that goodness that person's going to bring. And it is you said it's like part skill, it's part art, it's part science. I really buy into this idea. It's a lot. And I'm sure that like there's an argument to say that it's not art. You can definitely science. And, I'm not my career. I'm not like a hiring a HR professional. So I don't know all the research and stuff, but certainly from my own personal perspective of like meeting with lots of candidates over the time. And I've hired both as the hiring manager and as like a panel interviewer. And I've always found that the best approach for me is like definitely that kind of like trying to get a real kind of goodness, like the understanding of a person rather than an understanding with like their response to a behavioral question.
Yep. The resume isn't turning up doing the work on day one. It's the human, and it's the human that you need to understand. So, looking ahead then, how do you see sort of product leadership and sort of product teams sort of evolving over the next few years? I mean, the big elephant in the room is obviously AI. I know Zendesk's, been doing some work in that space. How do you see teams evolving?
This is really interesting. AI for sure. AI is changing everything. I think it's going to have a major impact on hiring. It's having a major impact on reviewing CVs. I'm already discovering they're way more personal to the role than they used to be. And I'm sure that like the candidate is not there personally rewriting the CV. AI is doing that. From a product management perspective, we've seen in the industry, in the product industry, not like the customer support or Melbourne or just like globally, a real pivot to senior ICs. And I would expect that to continue for the next while. I don't see like these kind of mid-level management roles kind of coming back a lot. I think that is being a trend that will likely to continue. And I think the impact of Gen AI is actually like going to accelerate that a lot. So there's an interesting conversation that was happening internally into like our management team channels at Zendesk around our perspective on like engineers using AI as part of like their engineering tasks and whether we like think that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think we should be embracing folks who are using AI in the candidate pipelines, especially if they're going to be asked to do it as part of their job. Using AI is becoming a skill. It's not a hack. It's not a cheat. It's not a workaround. It's actually a skill now. So if I think about like product management, one of the core things that product managers have to do is product discovery. And AI should make that easier than ever. It should make it easier to collect feedback and to aggregate feedback and to separate signal from noise. It should make it easier to collect data and to inspect that data and identify trends and validate hypotheses. It should be easier to do research on competitors and what's happening at an industry level. And so if you're using AI and you can demonstrate that, it's going to make you a better PM. It's going to make you a better candidate. It's going to make you more successful. And so as I think about like tying this back together, like I think what we'll see is that these senior IC roles will start to be filled in the future by the PMs that best work out how to leverage AI in their current job, their candidate experience to demonstrate their ability and their future jobs. And I think that that's really kind of like the major trend that we're likely to see. I'm all for using AI as part of, I think as hiring managers, we need to get better to work out how we use AI ourselves. I think candidates are getting very good at it.
Yeah. I particularly in the product space, I think you're right. There's so much opportunity for for this synthesis of data collection, research. And what that all winds up for me is it gives good PMs more thinking time to think through, ideate problem solving, hypothesize, look at data from different perspectives and come up with different ways to solve the business problem that they're actually trying to solve. So I think less time on doing the admin-y side of product. That's a technical term, admin-y side. And more time on the thinking, the hypothesis, the brainstorming, and looking at those batches of data from different perspectives. I couldn't agree more. I think it's an exciting time. I'm also mindful of your time. We've probably run a little bit over, but mate, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. Anything that people need to know about the roles you're hiring? Did you want to quickly talk about the roles that you're hiring at the moment, or is it easier for me to put the links to your roles in the comments for this? Or can people reach out to you directly?
Yeah, but people can reach out to me directly. We are quite far progressed in the pipelines, but to my point earlier, if we don't find the right person, we'll be back in market. And so I've always got my eyes open. So we've got a role in particular that's out in market around our marketplace and developer ecosystem. And we're looking for someone who's going to come in and own that at Zendesk, who can help grow our marketplace and to help grow our developer ecosystem. So, if there is someone watching, or there's someone that someone watching knows, that's a great fit for that might have great marketplace experience and also works building platforms for developers, then by all means, please reach out, because from my perspective, it's your front door, the people you hire, is the success of the company. So we're looking for the right person. We're not looking to land someone fast necessarily.
Yeah, perfect. Brilliant. My friend, thank you again so much. I really appreciate your time. Have a brilliant rest of the week.
Cheers, mate. You too. Lovely to see you again.
Take care. Cheers.